Here we go, Treadwell DPT back again with another anatomy breakdown, muscle by muscle. Another mini series. Some areas just need a little extra love. Our quads are extremely uniquely important, so of course we spend a lot of time there. We got some groups that will show a bit more love just because they're a bit tricky to learn. So without further ado, we're moving on to one of those tricky areas. We've got that posterior forearm. Home to your extensors, your stabilizers, and the muscles that give the forearm that sculpted, athletic look we all chase. Whether you're talking about gripping, throwing, climbing, or just flexing in the mirror, this group handles a lot more than people give it credit for. So we're going to take a step back and look at the unit as a whole, and in the next couple of weeks we'll move on and break each muscle down individually. So the posterior forearm, it's essentially your extensor compartment. That's the differentiation we'll generally make. Wrist flexors on the front, wrist extensors on the back. We've got 12 muscles, but we're going to exclude anconeus here, unfortunately. Just highlighting 11 of those 12 muscles. We're talking real movers here. Aside from anconeus, every muscle back here either extends the wrist and fingers, stabilizes the elbow, or helps fine-tune motions of the thumb and index finger. We split it into two layers, a superficial layer, the visible movers, and a deep layer, more of a precision group. So let's go top to bottom. In that superficial layer, we've got brachioradialis, technically more of an anterior compartment muscle, but functionally transitional, a flexor that hangs with the extensors. Similar origin point. We've got extensor carpi radialis longus. We've got extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor digitorum, and extensor digiti minimi, and then extensor carpi ulnaris. All of these originate from around that lateral epicondyle of the humerus, that bony bump on the outside of your elbow. And together they form that strong lateral ridge that pops when you extend the wrist or grip hard. Let's quickly glance at that lateral epicondyle for a second and really get an appreciation for its anatomy. That lateral epicondyle is considered the common extensor origin, so keep that in mind. The muscles we see originating here are your wrist extensors, your finger lifters, and your elbow stabilizers. In that deep layer, beneath those superficial muscles, that top 6 or 7 if you include anconeus, we've got 5 muscles. So we've got the supinator, we've got abductor pollicis longus, we've got extensor pollicis brevis, extensor pollicis longus, and extensor indicis. This group is all about control, fine tuning. They wrap around the radius and ulna and guide rotation and thumb movement. If the superficial layer is power, the deep layer is precision, stabilizing, repositioning, and fine-tuning grip and finger motion. Without them, coordinated hand movement goes out the window. So definitely keep that in mind. Superficial, more power, more gross movement. Those deep muscles, more of the precision movement. All of our muscles of the posterior arm and forearm are innervated by the radial nerve. Every one of those muscles in that posterior forearm, superficial and deep, is powered by that radial nerve or one of its branches. That's why an injury or entrapment around that radial tunnel can cause weakness in wrist and finger extension. We can take a second to appreciate that path, the radial nerve. And then here's that radial tunnel, so we'll take a second to appreciate that as well. Clinically, you'll see that wrist drop pattern when radial nerve activity takes a hit. So definitely keep that in mind. Look out for that wrist drop in your assessments. We've got a little mnemonic to remember the muscles of this region. A mnemonic that's both functional and motivational. A little Treadwell DPT exclusive. Should really help pin things down. So here it is, superficial to deep and lateral to medial. Also a little bit of a Yoda and Miyagi vibe to it, but bear with me. So we've got begin really rehabbing daily, demonstrating urgency. Soon all problems pale inevitably. It's a little bit of a sensei vibe to it, but I think it's pretty clean. Begin really rehabbing daily, demonstrating urgency. Soon all problems pale inevitably. Let's break that down. Begin, of course, being brachioradialis, really being extensor carpi radialis longus, so radialis longus. We've got an R and an L. Rehabbing being radialis brevis, we've got our R and our B. Daily being digitorum, demonstrating digiti minimi, and then urgency being ulnaris. In that deep group, we've got soon for supinator, we've got all for abductor pollicis longus, we've got problems for pollicis brevis, we've got our P and our B. Pale for pollicis longus, we've got our P and our L, and inevitably being indices. So again, superficial, then deep, and then in order from lateral to medial. Nice little line with some educational and motivational worth. So really lock that in. Once you've mastered that posterior forearm, the rest is pretty easy and straightforward in my opinion. Now, we can't talk posterior forearm without talking lateral epicondylitis, better known as tennis elbow. Clinically, this is one of the most common overuse injuries we'll see, and it traces back to that common extensor origin we mentioned earlier. That lateral epicondyle on the outside of the elbow. When those extensor tendons, especially the extensor carpi radialis brevis, are repeatedly overloaded, micro tears form right where they anchor into the lateral epicondyle. We're talking that repetitive wrist extension, gripping, typing, lifting, doing that backhand in tennis, even picking up a coffee cup. Those little everyday stresses add up over time. The mechanism is that every time you grip something, your wrist extensors fire isometrically to stabilize that wrist and counteract that flexion torque. If that demand becomes repetitive without adequate rest or tissue adaptation, the tendon starts breaking down faster than it can repair. That's where you get that tendinopathy presentation. Not necessarily a true inflammation or tendinitis per se, but that cycle of degenerative overload. Clinically, you'll see local tenderness right at or just distal to that lateral epicondyle a little further down. You'll see pain with that resisted wrist or finger extension, and often you'll see reduced grip strength due to that pain. Because multiple extensors share that tendon origin, it's usually not just one muscle involved. That extensor carpi radialis brevis takes most of the blame for sure, but extensor digitorum and extensor carpi radialis longus often join the party as well. From a rehab standpoint, the strategy is pretty simple but pretty powerful. So we'll go into detail about treatment a little bit. Firstly, we've got some good research for those counter force tennis elbow forearm straps for immediate symptom relief. So for our athletes that are really doing tennis and other sports specific stuff, or even just work related things where you feel that tennis elbow flare up, you could use one of those forearm straps and get a lot of relief. Of course, we know tendons respond best to loading. That's when you see those adaptations. So we want to gradually load, progressively load those extensors of the wrist. We want to address the grip mechanics and shoulder control to offload our elbow a little bit to some soft tissue stuff, and of course we'll eventually reintroduce those power tasks, those more specific tasks. Moral of the story, when you think tennis elbow, think of it less like an isolated injury and more like a communication issue between the wrists, the elbow, and the shoulder. That's sort of the idea with this group. We always say everything's connected. Now we're in the middle area of that arm, the upper extremity. That's especially true. That posterior forearm, very important in that regard. So keep that in mind. We're not just memorizing muscles here. We're seeing how structures meet function and how this function shows up clinically. Very, very cool, interesting area. Definitely looking forward to breaking down every one of these muscles individually, so be on the lookout for that as we progress. So yeah, a little bit of the calm before the storm. Nice overview of that posterior forearm. 12 muscles if we include our inconius. Otherwise, 11 real movers and shakers. Real pointers, pumpers, and extensors. And to top it off, we've got a cool way to learn every single one of those muscles. So begin really rehabbing daily, demonstrating urgency. Soon, all problems pale inevitably. That's anatomy, that's rehab, that's mindset. And we'll start with a big dog next week. We'll start with brachioradialis next video. Hey, much more in store, even more to come. Stay tuned, stay locked. It's Treadwell DPT. I'll catch you next time.